Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. And today we are offering you the truth. You need to reassess how you hit your drums. This is one of the things that we don't talk about enough on here as we move through tuning and tone. We touch on it from time to time. This is a huge deal, and we decided today to dive directly into this issue because it's as much about your sound as everything you might be doing to your drums in terms of tuning, tensioning, stick choice, all of that stuff. We are, of course, talking about the other big T, technique, and specifically we're talking about strike zones. We're talking about where you're hitting the drum on the surface of the drum. Obviously today, we don't need to talk about the bass drum. We're hitting that in the same place every time. But we are going to talk about snares, and we're also going to talk about toms because this is a huge part of the sound that you're making and also your perception of your own drums. First up, we have a drum in tune with itself, behaving itself. Let's listen to this drum. To avoid confusion, what you're listening to right now is a Supraphonic. There's an Acrolite in front of me, and that's going to come back to bite us later. But for now, we're going to discuss the behavior of this drum. This is pretty much right in the center of how we often tune this drum here. Nothing special going on. It's in tune with itself. It sounds like a drum. Where things start to get dicey is when we are playing music, we're going for a consistent sound, but we're not playing the drum consistently. Whether we're striking in the center, off center, playing rim shots, whatever it is, a consistent sound first and foremost starts with us. Check out how big a difference we get when we shift the strike zone from the center of the drum towards the edge. It's important to note at this point that none of this is about a good sound or a bad sound, so we don't need to have that argument today. We're talking about being intentional and making a choice about the sound that we're making rather than swinging, wildly at the drum and crossing our fingers that it's going to be the same every time. We know that there are viewers out there that as soon as they hear any kind of comparison, the first thing you'll want to say is which sound is the one that they like the best. Please open your hearts, open your ears, and consider the idea that these are all valid despite what your preferences may be. This is a perfect time to talk about how much fun there is in exploring a drum in the course of a groove or an improvisation. Rim shots, playing at the edge, mixing the center and the edge, trying to figure out just how many colors we can get out of it. Once you've spent some time with that, you can start to utilize these new colors and things you've found, even on a little kit like this, to start to find new ideas and grooves and change up the things that you might normally play. Just as a great story contains tension and release, or a problem to be solved, or even a song, verse, and chorus, we can have tension and release inside of the snare drum just by utilizing some of these things. And it means having maybe a snarkier sound opposite the really warm and clean sound so that we have something to move between and grow through what we're playing. If this is feeling a little flowery in the world of pounding away on drums, just remember that inside of all the craft here, there's also room for art. And if this isn't for you, if it makes you uncomfortable, that's okay, but realize that there's this whole other world out there that is available to explore if you want to. These issues also are prevalent on a floor tom. For instance, let's hear the difference between the center and the edge of this drum. Now let's take that and put it into a groove. It bears repeating that we didn't tune the Supraphonic or this floor tom to specifically exhibit this issue. This is the same way that we tune them all the time, but it's abundantly clear right out of the way that the edge of this drum does not behave the same as the center. Not better or worse, just significantly different. So if we are going for a certain sound, we need to be accurate, otherwise we might not get what we're looking for. Once we've gone through these sounds and decided what we might want to use them for, if we're going that route, we can start to put them into a groove and get a lot more mileage out of just 3 drums than you might expect. Science moment. When we hit the drum in the center, we're distributing that energy from the center to the edge basically evenly. It's getting to the edge everywhere at the same rate. So it's giving us a balanced sound. When we play off center, we're moving the node where we're striking off center, which is making that uneven, which both promotes overtones and really blasts us with anything going on in the drum that's not in tune, which means no matter what, it's still worth it to try to get the head in tune with itself so that you can cleanly use these off center sounds if you choose to. In some cases, and we would say often actually, playing off center of the drum can give you the impression that a drum that is in tune with itself is not, which can therefore take you down a whole rabbit hole where you're trying to fix a thing where the drum is not actually the issue. The issue is actually the way that the player is striking it. I've run into this. I think we've all run into it, but not everyone realizes the origin of the issue. This is yet another reason to explore this, because we don't want to spend any more time fussing with the drums than we have to, so that we can get back to making music, and especially get to make that music without stressing about the sound we're making. Now for something completely different. An Acrolite, the drum that everybody says is impossible to make sound bad. Well, we did. Now, this drum is intentionally out of tune, and the reason we're doing this is to show that if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a drum that is out of tune and you can't do anything about it, the strike zone is even more important. Specifically, how accurately can you hit the good spot? Generally speaking, and this goes to what we were saying earlier about the science of this issue, if you have a drum that is out of tune with itself, hitting it in the center or as close to center as you can is going to give you the best chance of having something resembling a good, even, round, and fat sound. It'll vary between rim shots and not catching the rim depending on the situation that you're in, but as soon as you start to move away from the center, that's when things really go off the rails. If I was sitting down to this drum and I had even 90 seconds, I would try to tune it a little bit, and I could get it sounding better than this for sure pretty fast, but there's also opportunities out there to utilize a really janky sounding drum that can actually be artistically inspiring, especially if you're trying to play grooves where you want the drums to sound a little broken. A very short aside, I actually was on a session once playing where a producer asked me to use a drum that was wildly out of tune to cut through a mix, which is not a phrase that we like to use here, but it was a phrase that he said. And the reason why it worked is because the dissonance in the drum allowed it to not blend in to everything that was happening, because there was a lot of distortion on the guitars. So the trashiness of the drum, by the time it got through all of the guitars, it just sounded like a snare drum, and all of that gnarly stuff was lost in the mix. but the sound of the drum was able to get through, and that made him happy, so I wasn't about to second guess it. The bottom line here is that snare drums, toms, whatever you may be playing, it is worth getting the thing in tune with itself, but it's equally important to make sure that the way that we're hitting it is the way that we mean to be hitting it, because we are the ones who are speaking through the instrument. This is a vessel for the playing that we want to do. So being able to use it in a way that's consistent and also consistent with the music that we want to make is just about as important as it gets. And as always, please, if you would, follow the link below to the Patreon. It's the best way to help us continue to make these episodes and bring you experiments like we brought today. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you hear about all our episodes. And do tell us any experiences that you've had with strike zone issues, especially if it was something that worked out in your favor. Dissonant drum, hitting it harder to make it work.